Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. If you're watching live, simulcast on DRF Live. If you're watching the podcast or listening to it, whether it's YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, ESPN.com, thanks for giving us some little part of your day. It is May the 27th, Friday here, Midtown Manhattan. Finally feels a little bit like we're inching towards summer. We've hit 90 the other day here in the city, and I think some other places on the East Coast as well have heated up. So finally the good weather is coming, and it's according as far as the calendar is concerned here in the racing season, because we've gotten through 2 legs of racing's Triple Crown. And unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, and whomever you're a fan of or a rooting interest, there won't be a Triple Crown on the line here in a few weeks at Belmont Park. I thought going into the Preakness that there probably would be, but guess what? Things didn't shake out that way. An Exaggerator finally turned the tables on Nyquist, was able to get himself another Grade 1 victory, and was able to turn the tables and finally defeat Nyquist for the first time in his career. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake down going forward. Now, at this stage in the game, Nyquist thought he ran a very good race in the Preakness, and we'll take a look at that momentarily. He just got cooked by the pace early on, and it set up beautifully for Exaggerator. I understand he ended up having the best of it, considering the racetrack was on wet going, on an off going, which he certainly loves. I don't think it moves him up any. He's just a good quality horse. But it certainly didn't help, or hurt his cause, rather. And the pace scenario obviously played into his hands. Let's take a look at the stretch run of the Preakness when Exaggerator makes his move.
Who turns for home with the lead, but Exaggerator sweeps up on the outside, and so Exaggerator looking to turn the tables on Nyquist, who's down to the rail. In the final furlong of the Preakness, Stradivarius moved to the third. Nyquist laboring, there is Exaggerator, and Kent Zormer with the 16th pull from Nyquist. Exaggerator in the Preakness turns the tables on Nyquist, who's trying to hang on to second, maybe Cherry Wine there, and they're followed by
Dave Rodman with the call down in Pimlico last Saturday, and as you can see, it wasn't as though it was a very tight score. Exaggerator won this race convincingly, but we've got to acknowledge the way that the race was run. The fractions early on were just blistering. This is 2 races in a row that Nyquist has been right up on some really, really swift early splits. 21-1, I believe, was the opening quarter, and unfortunately for him, he dealt with Uncle Lino early on, and he just got a little bit tired at the end. I don't think you can take anything away from the horse with the race that he ran in defeat. He finished 3rd. It is what it is. Not all horses win. I mean, American Pharoah lost, Secretariat's lost, plenty. All the good horses have lost. So him losing, particularly to a good horse like Exaggerator, is no disrespect. As far as Exaggerator is concerned, it finally feels like he's getting the recognition or the due he deserves. I know a lot of people immediately want to go and harp on that wet track and say that it moved him up in some gigantic way. I just disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think he's a very, very talented horse. I think it's really a sort of a 2-horse race, and when I say race, I'm thinking already for 3-year-old champion, and that doesn't mean that one of these other horses, whether it's a Stradivari, who it sounds like Todd Pletcher all of a sudden is teetering. Maybe we'll see him in a few weeks running the Belmont. Whether it is a horse like Bob Baffert's American Freedom, or someone else that hasn't shown up here yet. We'll talk about one horse that really made his 3-year-old debut, an impressive one the other day, when we talk about DRF Plus headlines here momentarily. But at the end of the day, it seems like it's a 2-horse race, and I think it's really kind of up for debate of which one of these 2 horses is better. Let's start off by taking a look at Nyquist's PPs. And at this stage in the game, again, everyone knows he's lost 1 time, the most recent start in the Preakness. This is a horse, though, that was undefeated leading up to it. And as you can see, it's a little bit tight, but working with what we got here with the PDF. Again, he's got the 103 buyer in the Derby. That was a career best number. And I suppose if you want to poke a couple holes and say, well, he hasn't really run that supremely fast race yet, I suppose. But again, at the end of the day, the way that he ran in that Derby, pressing that hot pace, the way that he ran in the Preakness, dealing with that hot pace early on, I don't think you can take anything away from this horse. He has an elevated white blood cell count. Apparently it's come down a little bit. His temperature has come down. We won't see him in the Belmont, which I think may ultimately hurt this one if we're talking long term. Now, we'll get into the hypotheticals in a minute. Let's take a look at Exaggerator's PPs and compare the 2 of them, where Exaggerator, again, he's got more losses on his resume. But my favorite part about this horse, from start 1 to his most recent, his 11th start, this horse continues to improve. And I understand he got the 103 in Santa Anita Derby, and he's come back with a couple 101s. But you just look, he's got that steady progression that you want to see. I don't ever like to see some sort of a giant jump in speed figures. And I suppose from start 1 to start 2 he had that, but guess what? A June 2-year-old, I'm not expecting him to run off the charts. He took that sort of incremental step forward bit by bit by bit, and he just keeps getting better. Again, I understand that there's going to be the people that want to say the wet track is what moved him up in a big way. I disagree. I just think he's a really talented horse, and we'll find out what my guest, Jonathan Kinchin, has to say about that in a little bit when we talk to him. But at the end of the day, I think the defection of Nyquist from the Belmont and Exaggerator going to the Belmont could play against Nyquist and into Exaggerator's hands as far as 3-year-old champion is concerned. We've still got a long way to go. You've got big races, the Travers, the Haskell, obviously the Breeders' Cup, and the races against the older horses. But as far as the Belmont itself is concerned, there doesn't look like there's a ton of speed signed on as far as pace is concerned. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people are, I don't want to say forgetting about Exaggerator, but the way that he's been ridden in the Derby, in the Santa Anita Derby, the Kentucky Derby, and the Preakness, it's been from off the pace. And Keith DeSormo's come out and said it. He goes, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This seems to be his best running style. I would just throw in the sort of interesting theory or thought that in a race that lacks a lot of early foot right now, with a horse that could press Nyquist going 7 furlongs, I won't be stunned at all. Kent DeSormo knows a thing or two about riding in the Belmont. I wouldn't be stunned at all to see Exaggerator much more forwardly placed. Maybe not outright on the lead, because you got a couple other horses that, again, whether they end up running or not, they'll be a little bit more handy than Exaggerator will. But I won't be stunned to see this horse sitting 2 lengths out of it rather than the 10, 15 that he has been each of the past 2 races. At the end of the day, the Preakness was a very good race. It was a good effort from both of the top 2 finishers. It was a good effort from, really, I don't think you can argue with anyone. Cherry Wine actually did finish second. Nyquist ran third. I thought all 3 of them ran very well. Stradivari in his first try against graded stakes competition. First try on a really wet track. Thought he ran very well. As well as Lonnie, who's all of a sudden, you're getting the whispers. Lonnie's confirmed for the Belmont. He's up here back in New York. He's working out a little bit, just stretching his legs. You're hearing more and more whispers about Lonnie going into the Belmont. You look at the way that he ran on at the end of the Derby, the way that he ran on at the end of the Preakness. He wants to run all day. The problem I have is he just always going to be spotting his competition 10, 15 lengths? Because if he does that in the Belmont, we've seen it time and time again, year after year. The Belmont's not a race won by deep closers. And I think everyone just immediately assumes that these horses that make these big moves from the back of the pack, that they're going to take advantage going 1.5 miles. That's not historically the proper running style or the most useful or most effective running style. You want to be forwardly placed. It'll be interesting to see. Again, it doesn't look like there's a ton of speed signed on paper. I wouldn't be stunned if Exaggerator's forwardly placed. And I think it could go a long way. If Exaggerator can win the Belmont, that'll be 3 of his past 4 races in Grade 1s that he's come out victorious. And now he'll have 2 legs of the Triple Crown to his name, not Nyquist's name. And Nyquist will be on the shelf until, let's hope, Saratoga. Maybe he shows up back at the Jim Dandy, the Travers. It'll be very interesting to see how these 3-year-olds continue to progress. These will be the conversations that we have with our good friend Jonathan Kinchin. He's a member of the DRF Players Podcast. He's the reigning and defending NHC Tour champion. He will join us after the break here on the Matt Bernier Show, brought to you by our friends at Monmouth Park. Stay with us.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with 1 click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
12:09 East Coast, 9:09 West Coast, now 9:10 West Coast. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live, brought to you by our friends at Monmouth Park. Before we dive into our conversation with Jonathan Kinchin, we try to keep things all very sporting here as far as this show is concerned. Rafael Nadal withdrawn from the French Open, which is a big sort of disappointment because the French is usually where Rafa ends up strutting his stuff. So, unfortunately, he is withdrawn from the early rounds of play. Let's bring in Jonathan Kinchin. You can follow him on Twitter at UTBigHair. He's a member of the DRF Players Podcast. He is the reigning champion for the NHC Tour. Jonathan, what do we got going on?
Oh, man, I'm just running around getting ready for playing in a tournament tomorrow at Lone Star Park. They're round 2 of a free tournament situation they have. So I'm going to fly up tomorrow morning, play in the tournament, fly back to Austin, and enjoy some Memorial Day festivities.
Well, I was going to talk about the contest part toward the end of our discussion, but let's start off with it at the top. Give me an idea right now. I know you played out at Santa Anita this past weekend for the Preakness Challenge. All in all, you were toward the top of the leaderboard after day 1. How did day 2 end up shaking down? We know Vic Stauffer, the former announcer at Hollywood Park, he emerged victorious. What happened with you on day 2?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was one of those deals where, I'm sure most horse players have had this happen, where you don't really have great opinions leading up, through 2 days of betting, but somehow your bankroll continues to grow. And then when you get to your good opinions that you've been waiting for, you fire at them and your opinions were wrong. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, I just kind of was floating around, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. I got to my big opinion that Lieutenant Colonel in the stakes race was guaranteed to run 1-2. I front and back wheeled him in exactas with all the money that I had left, and he ran 3rd.
He ran a good race, though, considering he was up there, and he set legitimate fractions. It'll be interesting to see if they bring him back in the Gold Cup here, closing weekend out at Santa Anita. As far as the Tour itself is concerned, you won last year the Tour Challenge as far as the entire year is concerned. Are you going again to try to repeat? And if so, where do you stand right now as far as the standings?
Yeah, I'm not doing it like I did last year with red-eye flights and 3 tournaments in 1 weekend, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to participate in the ones I want to participate in. I'm going to participate in the ones that make sense financially and chronologically, and if it falls in place, it falls in place. I'm double qualified already. I've got an online second, which is good for a lot of points, and a good live score. So, a win at somewhere like Saratoga or the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, it's something that all of a sudden could be a possibility again. So I'll just keep plugging away, see if I can't snag up some points along the way, and then maybe turn on the afterburners late in the year.
Yeah, and having been involved with the Tour prior to working here, I can empathize a little bit with all of you guys and gals that go out there and are trying to win the Tour itself, because I think a lot of people don't really truly understand just how grueling it can be, because if you want to have a chance at winning, you've got to be playing almost every weekend, and you've got to be at a lot of these sort of brick and mortar events. You've got to be on site all over the country.
No, absolutely. And I was very fortunate, and still am fortunate, that my, a lot of people have talked about it. My mother retired from American Airlines, so the only good thing about my parents' relationship not working out is that I get to be her registered companion. So I get to fly for free, and it's a standby life. It can be a little hectic at times, but like I said, tomorrow morning I'm going to fly up to Dallas from Austin and fly back on the same day. It's not something I think most people could find a very economically intelligent decision, but for me it's free, so it works out.
Joined by Jonathan Kinchin here on the Matt Bernier Show, member of the DRF Players Podcast, 2015 NHC Tour champion. Let's talk about some racing here, and let's go well back. And I say well back, it's a few weeks now at this point. Let's go back to the Derby. Going into it, I know you and we had exchanged some texts back and forth, and really we were kind of unsure about how the race was going to go, where it looked like you could be setting it up for bombs away and with the pace scenario and whatnot. Ultimately, it ended up being very formful, where the first time in history in the Derby, you had the first, second, third, and fourth choices run 1, 2, 3, 4. Overall thoughts on the Derby itself before we dive into the Preakness and these individual horses?
Oh, my Derby opinion. This is, I've been seriously betting the Kentucky Derby for 8 years. I've been 8 years in a row, and this is the most wrong I've ever been. I literally tossed all 3 of those horses that ran in the trifecta, and so my opinion leading into the race obviously wasn't very good. I guess that I think as horse players, you have to take a stand when it comes to big races like that on what you think is going to happen with the pace scenario. I think if you're wishy-washy, you're wasting a really good opportunity to make a lot of money. So in that position, I thought that the pace was going to be I thought Dancing Candy was going to be loose. I thought the pace was going to be fair. I thought there was horses that wanted to be forward but didn't need the lead. And I guess all the jocks in the room saw the same thing I saw, and they went on with it. And it ended up being a very quick pace. And Nyquist stuck around and ran a really big race. And his performance in that race and how the pace was is kind of what led me to probably what our next conversation is to be, and that's falling for him in the Preakness.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Preakness a little bit. We're coming into it. He went off at 3-5, or I thought that's kind of where he belonged. And at the end of the day, it was a scenario where I think the connections, if you went to them and really just asked what was the thought, what was the game plan, I really believe they wanted to ride this horse like American Pharoah and said, if we're on the best horse, let's go on with it. The problem was Uncle Lino was a tough cookie, and he hung around for a long time. I assume the way that you kind of led into this, you liked Nyquist in that situation, and what did you think overall of the performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did. I felt like you kind of had to off of that performance you ran in the Derby. And I was listening to Steve Vick's show earlier this week or last week, and Paul Matisse was on, the current NHC tournament champion, and he brought up a good point. He's like, if that was their tactic, I understand it, but it was poorly thought out in the idea that American Pharoah was the speed of the speed last year. The other speed was trained by the same connections, so that was one horse you didn't have to worry about. Firing Line was the only other horse you really had to beat in the race. And then the converse in this Preakness, there was a lot of other horses that could have shown speed. Uncle Lino, Ferrari, the awesome speed horse, the other, I can't remember the other horse, the local horse. There's a lot of other horses that could have shown speed, and your biggest threat was a closer. So it was a completely different scenario, and if that was your plan, I think that it was a mistake.
Now, as far as look, he got a great pace scenario, but are you on board with all the people that are looking at Exaggerator and just saying he's a wet track freak, he got everything his own way, and it just worked out perfectly? Or, I mean, do you look at it a little bit more along the lines that I do, and I would make the argument with people that, okay, he likes a wet track, but this is just a quality horse who continues to get better? No,
I do. I think he's a quality horse, but I do think he is an extremely fortunate horse. If you look back at his last three races, two of them were with blazing fast fractions, with Dancing Candy running off in the San Anita Derby, getting a setup on a wet track, with Nyquist setting, if not the fastest, one of the fastest fractions in Preakness history on a wet track with a setup. And then in the Derby, they went more than fair in that race with the fractions that they ran there. And so in my opinion, he's gotten three setups in a row. And if we were betting in the middle of the summer on random races at Saratoga and Del Mar, it's the type of horse you would fade. But because he keeps winning these big races and making important runs or big runs at these horses late, I think that he's caught a lot of people's attention. I've been made fun of a lot in my group text. A lot of the guys that are in it, Travis Stone and Nick Tamero and Eric Bialek and some of those guys. And they make fun of me all the time because I keep talking about the horse. And they yell at me saying, well, what more does he need to do? He runs second in the Derby, he won the Preakness and the Santa Anita Derby. I just think that he keeps getting setups, and if you throw him into a race where they go 48 and change, I don't see him hitting the board.
Well, and I guess this kind of segues into my next question, kind of what I talked about at the top. In a head-to-head sort of standpoint at this stage in the game, I think from an accomplishment standpoint, you could make an argument that right now as 3-year-olds anyway, maybe not including the 2-year-old campaigns, as 3-year-olds, Exaggerator is as accomplished, if not more accomplished, than Nyquist. On the square, true, in your heart of hearts, who do you really think is better? It sounds like you're leaning toward Nyquist.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that Nyquist throughout the rest of the year, just based on, we can just call it a pure tactical advantage. I think Nyquist will win more races moving forward because of his tactical advantage. And obviously we'll hopefully see them bump heads a few more times along the line to really determine who is better. But I think the tactical advantage is huge. And so in that regard, I would probably lean with Nyquist.
Now, Nyquist, unfortunately, he had an elevated blood level, his cell count, whatever you want to call it. Again, I'm not a vet. I don't know how all this stuff works. He spiked a bit of a fever. They didn't ship him to Belmont. They ultimately chose against going in the Belmont. Sounds like Exaggerator is planning on coming up here and running. From a tactical standpoint, again, we've got a few weeks to go before we actually see what the field looks like. But the current list of probable runners in this spot, it doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of early foot in this spot. You know, is it a horse like Destin for Todd Pletcher, who's been pointing to this race all along from the Derby, who can be forward, he can be a little bit more handy? Do you give someone like that the advantage over a horse like Exaggerator? Or do you think there's a scenario in which, again, Exaggerator, you go back to the beginning of the year, he was sitting right there with Nyquist going 7 furlongs in that San Vicente. Do you think there's a scenario in which Kent D takes his horse and has him a little bit more forward into the running?
Well, I think that the pace scenario obviously is the biggest question. It is in all racing, but especially in the Belmont. You know, I think going into the Derby, most people that were knocking Destin were knocking the long break and the idea that he was going to come in off of 8 weeks or 7 or whatever it was into the Derby. Well, now that complaint has kind of been subsided because now he'll be coming into this race in a more appropriate length of time between races with the Derby under his belt. And, you know, and Todd can get a horse ready, obviously, off a break, and he sure can get one ready to run well at 1.5 miles, you know, Rags of Riches, Commissioner. So, yeah, I think Destin is a very likely horse that will be involved early based on his pace. One of the things that I've noticed from the Belmont is the idea that these closers are going to excel now that they have more ground to run at. And I think that's probably one of the biggest myths in racing. What I think will happen, and one of the things that's almost impossible to predict, is one of those horses, Creator, Sudden Breaking News, Mo Tom, the one that I actually really want to bet, Booty's Cause. If one of them will be put into the race earlier, I think they're the type of horse that I will be looking for to bet. So I'll be looking for clues with faster workouts. Hopefully one of them will add blinkers. Creator already wears blinkers. I'd love for Brody's Cause or Sudden Breaking News. I think he might actually wear blinkers anyways. But and then just tactics and maybe some conversations with the trainers, thinking that those horses are going to be put into the race a little bit more. Those are the type of horses I want in the Belmont.
Yeah, and I said the exact same thing at the top, you know, where everyone just assumes that these deep closers, now they get 1.5 miles to run with and to work with, it's going to be to their advantage, and just that historically hasn't been the case. The way you win this race is having a little bit of tactical speed and being forwardly placed. As you said, a horse like Commissioner a few years ago, no one would make the case that he is as talented as the top 2 or 3 runners in there, but that tactical advantage, he can be forwardly placed. It's very difficult to make up any sort of real ground going 1.5 miles at the Belmont.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, Palace Malice was sitting on a huge race the year that he won it off of the fractions and the situation that he had in the Derby. But, yeah, I mean, they staggered home. I don't remember the time. They came home in, like, something almost embarrassing. But it's like, you know, those horses are – I always tell people, you know, you go out there and run a mile, I don't care how fast you ran early, you're going to be tired at the end of it. So all those horses are tired. It doesn't make a difference if they were way back or not. They're all tired, and sometimes being up there is half the battle.
We got a few more minutes here with Jonathan Kinchen. Before we let you go, I want to kind of transition over to we're going to call it from now on sort of the Classic division, where ultimately these 3-year-olds, they'll hopefully target the Breeders' Cup Classic at the end of the year. But I think the Classic division, it's kind of self-explanatory. Everyone's trying to get to the Breeders' Cup Classic out at Santa Anita. The way that the racing landscape has kind of set itself up right now, and we'll see next year, maybe it'll change with the introduction of the Pegasus Invitational. You know, the Dubai World Cup takes a lot of our best horses, and for the first sort of half of the year, they're occupied with that run. I mean, do you look at this right now and say California Chrome is head and shoulders the horse to beat at this stage in the game, or are there some other, whether they're males or females, I'm talking about Beholder, is there a scenario in which you look at some other horses that you're a little bit more interested in than California Chrome?
No, I mean, I would think that California Chrome is probably leading the division at the time based on that run. We were sitting around Santa Anita the other day and pulled up the Trackus information for the race in Dubai, and he went like 70 or 80 feet further than everyone else in that race, and had every excuse in the book to stop when he went on. That was pretty impressive. And so, you know, I think he's probably the leader. Obviously, you have to respect Beholder. It's you know, what she's been able to do in this long career is something extraordinary. And then you got to respect horses, like you said, the 3-year-olds that will be improving. You know, obviously you'd like to think that Nyquist or Exaggerator are one of those horses, and whoever our Travers winner is someone that will show up in that spot. But another horse I think made a little bit of noise this weekend and reminded us that his 2015 wasn't a fluke, and that was Noble Bird. You know, I mean, that was pretty impressive what he did in the Pimlico Special. And so, you know, they'll come out of the woodworks. You know, the Met Mile winners and one that we might see stretch out, and who knows? I mean, they can ever get the horse right, I could see the connections being. I was going to say crazy, but that was going to be mean, but I already said crazy anyway, so I'll just stick with it. But Run Happy could be one that shows up in one of these spots eventually.
It's going to be interesting to see how things shake down. You bring up Noble Bird. He got a very gaudy 110 buyer speed figure, and it sounds like Norm Cassidy and company, they're going to be trying to point toward the Met Mile here in a few weeks on Belmont Stakes Day. Jonathan Kinchin, you can follow him on Twitter at UTBigHair. You can listen to him twice a week on the DRF Players podcast, and you can see him obviously out there in the NHC landscape as far as the tournament play is concerned. Great stuff as always, my friend. I will see you. First time will be closing weekend out at Santa Anita for the Gold Cup.
Matty Ice, I'll see you there.
All right, bud. We'll talk soon. We'll take a quick break here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, we'll go into some DRF Plus headlines, and down the road, we'll talk about a little bit of handicapping for this weekend and review last weekend at Pimlico. Stay with us.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
.27 East, 9:27 West, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live, presented by our friends down on the Jersey Shore at Monmouth Park. Before we dive into the handicapping for this week, let's talk about some DRF Plus headlines. You can obviously find all of the news feed just below the video player if you're here on DRF Live, or if you're watching or listening to the podcast, you can want to come on, live.drf.com. Not only will you have all of our video coverage that we have, but down below us, the DRF Plus subscriptions, you're going to want to go and take a look at those, and you'll have access to all sorts of great info from our handicappers and writers across the country. Let's actually start off with a headline that's not right now a DRF Plus headline. I just read something on Twitter. Robert Yates does good work down as far as Oaklawn is concerned. He tweeted something about sudden breaking news. He's been reported as a gelding basically his entire career. Apparently, they just found out that he had 2 undescended testicles, which means he's actually a ridgeling. He's not a gelding. Gelding, obviously, when they've been gelded, they have the testicles removed. A very odd scenario. I don't know how that could have gotten through a horse running in the Kentucky Derby, that no one knew that he was not a gelding. He was actually still a whole horse. Who knew? So apparently, for what it's worth, I don't know, there's some people that are big into that kind of stuff. Sudden breaking news is not a gelding. He's still got all of his bits and pieces. He is a ridgeling at this stage in the game. So let's dive into the DRF Plus segment of the DRF Plus headlines. Jim Dunleavy, this one is more of a wagering sort of MO, or a whatever you'd like to call it. It's basically just giving you the heads up on what you can be getting down on this afternoon. Jim wrote about Pimlico. The Rainbow Six is up to over $171,000. Most of that money came from Preakness weekend, whether it was a Black Eyed Susan or into the Preakness on Saturday. And again, these are the sort of bets. I understand a lot of people gripe about the takeout. Once you get to a certain point, as far as the carryover is concerned, it basically negates the takeout, and you can get to a certain scenario, and we'll talk about one wager momentarily, where you can really be looking at it as a positive sort of expectation or a positive return, simply because there's so much dead money already in the pool. Pimlico's at $171,177. That can be played on DRF Bets. If you don't have a DRF Bets account, want to get involved, check that all out. Again, you can find everything right there on DRF.com. I'm going to kind of just piggyback on that and say Golden Gate Fields. I've been playing it, I don't want to say regularly, but I've been playing it probably once or twice a week, and it's one of those, particularly at Golden Gate, the pick six is almost up to $1 million going into today. And it's a scenario where you've got rather short fields. It seems unlikely that it will get scooped, simply because you don't have that many horses running. But it's one of those scenarios where you can get involved for a very small investment and expect a pretty decent return. Again, just because that carryover is such a big number. You can also play Golden Gate Fields on DRF Bets as well. So good stuff there. You've got plenty of wagering opportunities here today and leading in through the rest of the weekend. Dave Grenning. This is going to be a heavy Dave Grenning segment because he's got plenty of headlines here on DRF Plus. First one, Destin this morning worked toward the Belmont Stakes. He worked in company with Stanford. For Todd Pletcher, Stanford is targeting the mile. It'll be interesting to see where he goes, simply because you've got Anchor down in there. You've got Blofeld. Those are other Pletcher runners that are also targeting that race. But as far as Destin is concerned, 5/8 in a minute, 1 3/5 of a second over the Belmont training track. Again, Destin's a horse. We just talked to Jonathan Kinchin about it. It'll be interesting to see ultimately where this horse is positioned in the running, because on paper, there doesn't look like there's a ton of speed, and Destin can at least be handy. We've seen he's sat off of a target in the past, particularly the Tampa Bay Derby. Wouldn't be surprised to see him more forwardly placed. My bigger concern with him is he just needs to be a little bit more professional, and I like that he looked better in the Kentucky Derby. He's still rather lightly raced, all things considered, and he's just been a bit of a goof as far as training and his runs are concerned. I like him. I think he's got ability, and Pletcher knows how to get him going for a mile and a half. He worked 5/8 in 1:01.67 this morning over Belmont training track. Dave Grenning, another Belmont worker. Governor Malibu working toward the Belmont for Christophe Clement, 5/8 of a mile, 1 minute, 7 point. Let me say it again. 1 minute, 3/5 of a second. 1 minute, 0.72 seconds. Joel Rosario was up for the work. Again, Clement and Joel, they teamed up for Tonalist a few years back when they upset California Chrome's run for the Triple Crown. And Clement tweeted earlier, right after the work was done, our Belmont hopeful Governor Malibu worked 5 furlongs this morning and seems to be progressing nicely. He's a horse that he clearly doesn't look like distance is going to be any sort of an issue for him. Again, it'll come down to pace, because he's the kind of horse that he's not going to be coming from 100 out of it, but he's going to be coming from a little bit further out than maybe they would prefer. It'll be very interesting, and like Jonathan kind of alluded to, it wouldn't stun me at all if we get to a scenario in which one of these riders on a horse that's coming from the back of the pack, and I've already kind of pegged exaggerators, maybe that horse, if you can get them into the running a little bit earlier than what they've been accustomed to, where they don't have to come from 15 out of it, that can go such a long way in this race in the Belmont Stakes. This one comes down to tactics almost as much, if not more so, than any other race that you're going to find. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, Governor Malibu, an interesting outfit for Clement and Joel Rosario. I would imagine Rosario will have them out on Governor Malibu. Dave Grenning again, talking about Gift Box. He came back and debuted as a 3-year-old yesterday at Belmont Park. Castellano was up. He never looked like a loser. This horse finished very, very well. Unfortunately, the timing is probably not ideal for the Belmont. It doesn't seem like he's going to end up going there, but as Dave Grenning had suggested in his piece, you would have to imagine if this horse stays sound. Now, he's been dinged up a little bit. There's a reason that this was his 3-year-old debut so late. You would assume if he stays healthy, you're going to be looking at a Jim Dandy Travers kind of horse up at Saratoga for Chad Brown. This is a very nice-looking animal. He galloped out well. I thought all things considered it was a very positive return, especially considering the company he was keeping. Ran against a horse in Gettysburg, ran against a couple other decent ones, Direct Messages and okay sort. So very interesting race and a very interesting horse in Gift Box for Chad Brown. Marcus Hirsch, another Belmont Stakes runner, creator. He has been confirmed. He'll run in the Belmont. I think he's a legitimate runner. He, unfortunately, like so many deep closers in the Kentucky Derby, he got into trouble at the top of the lane as he was just starting to pick his feet up. So I can't hold that against him. I think if you do, you're making a mistake. You've got to draw a line through it. I think he's a legitimate contender. The problem is he has 0 early speed. And like Jonathan had alluded to, you'd like to see if this horse could be a little bit more forwardly placed, what he could do. Because I think he's going to run all day. You look at that pedigree, bit of a late bloomer. Who knows? We've seen crazier things happen. I don't think anyone expected the pace in the Derby to be blistering the way that it was. I for sure don't think we're going to have that in the Belmont, but at the end of the day, you never know. I'd love to see. It'll be interesting to see if Ricardo Santana retains the mount or if Steve Asmussen goes elsewhere for a rider that's ridden up here at Belmont more frequently. maybe he's one. If you get Creator into the running a little bit earlier, maybe he could be a bit of an upset player in the Belmont Stakes. And the final one we'll talk about as far as DRF Plus headlines are concerned, Dave Grenning. FNX working toward the Stephen Foster. That's going to be run. It's a grade 1 at Churchill Downs. That'll be run on June the 18th. FNX were 7/8 over Belmont's training track and 127-2. He's targeting this race. Obviously, June 18th is the date for it. I think he's already proven at Churchill Downs, winning the Clark Handicap last fall. He's proven this year that, you know what, he ran in that race at Santa Anita. I'm not holding that against him, considering the way that the race was run and the fact that he broke out in hives, might not have been feeling very good. Thus, running the Oaklawn Handicap was terrific. He and Melatonin, they went basically 1-2 the entire way. They just flipped positions. I thought they both ran very well. FNX, I think you've got to look at him as a legitimate player going forward in that sort of Breeders' Cup Classic division, because 1.25 miles, no problem for him. Santa Anita, I don't think is going to be an issue for him, regardless of what happened in the Santa Anita Handicap. FNX working toward the Stephen Foster, and long-term goal is the Breeders' Cup Classic. DRF Plus headlines, again, right below the video player. If you're not a subscriber to DRF Plus, you can check it out. We've got all sorts of good deals for you. drf.com/plus for all of our sort of subscriptions. We're going to take a quick break here on the show. When we come back, we'll review what happened as far as last weekend's handicapping is concerned, and we'll look at a few races this upcoming weekend that we'll have for you here on DRF Live Saturday afternoon. Stay with us.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
They're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home, and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do.
12:38 East Coast, 9:38 West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live, presented to you by our friends down on the Jersey Shore at Monmouth Park. As we do every week on this show, we go over some handicapping. At the end of the day, we try to mix in some other sports, some more mainstream stuff, but at the end of the day, this is a horse racing show, so that's what we talk about, horse racing. We gamble a little bit. We like to have a couple bucks on this thing, huh? The review, I'm always going to tell you if I'm terrible or if I'm good. I have no problem tooting my own horn. I also have no problem saying I sucked. Last weekend was a bit of a mixed bag, which I think, generally speaking, you're going to find for most people, that's how it goes. It's a mixed bag. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and you just hope that your wins make up for your losses. So here we go. Let's dive back into the review of last weekend. Everything was revolving around Pimlico, the Preakness, the Black-Eyed Susan, all sorts of stuff. Let's start off. We had 2 races on Friday. I thought the Hilltop was a very interesting race going into it. I thought you could have gone a number of ways. Dan Illman and Mike Beer and myself, we had brought it up and saying that this might be one of the wagering races, if not the wagering race of the weekend. There was a filly in Channel Regatta that I really liked. I thought she was fantastic in her 2 races. And Mike Claudia, what was that? That's fine. I thought Channel Regatta was a filly that at the end of the day, she's got a ton of upside, but she was a little bit green. Unfortunately, we won't have a replay for you, but you can go into Formulator and pull it up and take a look. she's just one that runs in spots, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a story about the Hilltop and why racing can drive you nuts, absolutely nuts. There was a filly called Gone Away for Michael Matz who ended up winning, and she was 13 to 1. She paid $26, $28. And this was a filly, if any of you are familiar with our DRF Live coverage on Saturdays, that if you go back, I don't know, 2 months or so, there was a race down at Gulfstream Park in which she ran, and myself and Dan Illman were on, and I said, I really think this filly's pretty good. And I'm thinking down the road, we give her a little bit more time, a little more seasoning. I think she can be something, though. She can run. She ran third that day at 15 to 1. Naturally, she shows up in this spot, and she ran one time prior to this at Keeneland and caught soft ground. And I just thought, I didn't think she loved the ground. She shows up here at Pimlico and she wins and pays $28. And here I am. Look, I think Channel Regatta is still a very interesting filly. She just ran in spots on Friday afternoon. Don't hold that against her. She finished 7th at 12 to 1. I think she's a filly you're going to want to keep an eye on, but I do think that the Michael Matz filly is very good. And again, maybe it sounds like crying over spilt milk. Guess what? That's what we do as horse players. We complain when we lose, and we love to gloat when we win. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, Channel Regatta, she runs 7th as a live long shot at 12 to 1. Let's move to the Black-Eyed Susan. I thought the most likely winner. I thought it was sort of most likely winners, but I ended up choosing Land Oversea as the most likely winner over Go Maggie Go. I think Go Maggie Go still has more upside. I just feared that it was a little bit too soon for her, and I thought a live long shot in this race was the far outside runner, the 14 Moms on Strike for Joe Sharp. Let's take it as they turn for home.
On Strike on the outside in third, and on the inside is Mark Can Do It in fourth. Land Overseas to the center attack. It is plenty to do at this point. There's a furlong left to go, and it is Go Maggie Go. Go Maggie Go finally shakes free of Kinsley Kisses. The outside is Moms on Strike, who's running a big one, and to the inside is Mark Can Do It. Go Maggie Go, wandering a bit to the crowd at Pimlico to win.
Dave Rodman with the call there, and the Black-Eyed Susan. Go Maggie Go gets the job done. Land Oversea you didn't see. She had a pretty significant trouble going into the first turn, and she was really up against it from the pace scenario. With the way that race was run, they went fast early, and those interior 2 quarters, they really backed it down, and it really kind of compromised anyone trying to make a big move from the back of the pack. It's probably why you want to upgrade a horse in Dothraki Queen for Kenny McPeak, who ran so well from the back of the pack. As far as Moms on Strike is concerned, she finished 5th at 16 to 1. But if anyone watched the race or bet on it, or you can go into DRF Formulator and pull up the replay, she did a lot of running considering this was her 3rd lifetime start, first time against winners, first time shipping, or 2nd time shipping, I should say. Her debut was at Fairgrounds, and then she broke her maiden at Oaklawn. She was hung so wide, and she ran every step of the way. Thought it was a very, very good effort from Moms on Strike. Thought Irad Ortiz did everything he could. She just unfortunately got a little bit tired at the end. I think she's one that you're going to want to keep an eye on. I think she's got some upside. As far as Go Maggie Go is concerned, the winner, you saw her go back to her left lead late there. She was very tired. And it sounds like Romans and company, they're going to continue on with her, and they want to go on to the Acorn on Belmont Stakes Day. It's a 1-turn mile, and I think that fits very well for her. But the concern I have is, again, I sound like a broken record, and maybe it won't happen. Maybe she's a bit of a freak and she'll just keep going on with it. I'm afraid that this is a lot to throw at a lightly raced filly in a short amount of time, and I'm wondering now if the Acorn, when she's going to be one of the choices, she'll have to deal with Catherine Sophia, she'll have to deal with a couple other good ones. I'm wondering now, this is the time that she's going to take that step back, and you're going to want to... You always want to be off one too early instead of one too late. And for me, with Go Maggie Go, I love her. I'm a big fan of her. From a wagering standpoint, she's always going to be the one that I'm always going to be off, and we'll find out. Maybe she never takes that step back. Who knows? But I won't be betting on her come Acorn time on Belmont Stakes Day. Let's move on to the Saturday edition of last week's show. The Sir Barton, I thought, was an interesting race. Everyone knows my son, Dazzling Gem, was in it. I didn't love him in that spot. I figured he was a horse that was likely to hit the board, but I didn't think he was going to win. American Freedom from Bob Baffert was going to be very, very tough if he ran his best race. And we talked about it, how it was interesting that Baffert was going to wheel him right back in 2 weeks. It's a very un-Baffert-like move. I thought a live long shot was the 4 Voluntario for Rudy Rodriguez. He went off at 9 to 1. Let's take it as they turn for home, Dave Rodman.
On. Donegal Moon now gets that head in trot. And to the center of the track is Fearless Dragon. Up the inside comes Voluntario. Voluntario and Liscano up the rail now to challenge American Freedom, who's taken heat every step of the way. But look at the heart of American Freedom. American Freedom and Voluntario to the inside with a 16th to go. American Freedom, Florent Giroux. American Freedom is all heart. Voluntario, then Dazzling Gem, followed.
Look, a very game effort from American Freedom, and I have no complaints about the way Voluntario ran. Got a fantastic ride from Jose Lezcano shooting up the wood, and unfortunately, just the Baffert horse was the talk of the town going into Derby weekend, going into the Pat Day Mile, that this is the best 3-year-old in the country. Not anybody running in the Derby. Forget about Nyquist, forget about Exaggerator. American Freedom, and he bombed. He ran horribly down at Churchill. The fact that Baffert reeled him back in 2 weeks, and he even said so afterward. He goes, this is a good horse, and I was embarrassed and I was disappointed for the horse the way that he ran. He was better than that. We know that. And clearly you can see he's got a little bit of heart. Getting out to 2 turns, I think that was a huge, huge deal for this horse, considering he debuted at 7. He ran a 1-turn mile in the Pat Day. You get him to 2 turns, he looks like a proper router. Thought he ran very, very well, very gamely, and it'll be interesting to see. I think he'll be a player down the road as we get into the summer races. As far as Voluntario is concerned, no complaints. Thought he ran, got a beautiful trip. It just didn't work out for him. A nice sort of live long shot at 9-1 if you used him underneath. And Dazzling Gem, we got to talk about my son because Brad Cox brought it up after the race. Luis Saez was the jock. Saez said that this horse runs in spots. We've all been saying that for a while now, and it's true. And this is a horse that is still just, he's a bit of a dummy. Figuring it out. You saw him. He was drifting around like a drunk guy going down the middle of the track. I think he just needs to be a little bit sharper. And Brad Cox, the trainer, and Luis Saez, they both alluded to it, saying maybe blinkers. Throw some blinkers on him, sharpen him up a little bit. I've got a crazy idea. I know it's not going to happen. If you put blinkers on him for a couple of works, maybe this week, maybe next week, put the blinkers on, see how he reacts. Run him in the Belmont Stakes. He's going to run all day. He's shown that he's not going to completely fold or cave in. He'll run all day. There's no speed in that race. You put blinkers on, you have him forwardly placed. I would try the Belmont. I know it sounds insane. Brad Cox knows a heck of a lot more than I do. I would try the Belmont Stakes with Dazzling Gem with the blinkers on. The Dixie. The Dixie was a bit of a disappointment simply because it seemed like the entire field scratched out of it. So I thought the most likely winner was Grand Arch number 7. I thought a live long shot was the 13 Cage Fighter. Cage Fighter scratched out of the race. Grand Arch went off at 2-1. Let's take it as they turn for home.
As they reach the top of the stretch and swing for home, it is Grand Arch leading the way. Grand Arch ring weekend out in the center of the track. Captain Dixie's trying to punch through some traffic. Conquest Typhoon continues a big brave battle on the inside. On the far outside, Takeover Target might roll the top over the top of them. Takeover Target is coming. Takeover Target is trying to get up. Takeover Target perfectly timed by Joel Rosario.
Grand Arch got a little bit tired there at the end. Takeover Target. You just can't beat Chad Brown on turf. Chad Brown's got about, he may have the 15 best turf horses in the country. That's being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little facetious. But at the end of the day, you can't beat Brown. He just shows up. All of his horses run on turf. Takeover Target, he really loved that cut in the ground. I was a little bit concerned about the cut in the ground for him. Prove me wrong, it happens. As far as Grand Arch is concerned, you heard some whispers from Brian Lynch going into the day saying, you know what, if the ground's a little bit too testing, we may not go. Which sounds bizarre because this is a horse that has been proven on good going and yielding going time and time again. Almost that's actually what he wants. It kind of gave off the air that maybe this horse, you've almost got a built-in excuse. That maybe he's a little bit short, maybe he's not ready to go, and that ultimately you'll see better from him down the road. I thought it was a decent enough effort. Also a good effort from Ring Weekend off of a 300, 400-day layoff, considering we last saw him out at Santa Anita and Kilroe Mile last year in 2015. Thought it was a very good effort. Graham Motion must be pleased as well. Let's dive into the 3 races we'll talk about this weekend. All 3 of them we'll have covered for you on DRF Live tomorrow afternoon starting at 4 o'clock Eastern. The Arlington Classic, a race out there at Arlington Park in Chicago. It's a scenario where I think the most likely winner is the 4 Surgical Strike. He's 5-2 on the morning line. Surgical Strike ran in the American Turf on Derby Day, the Derby undercard, and he ran into a tough spot where he had a couple of salty runners. You can take a look if you're watching on DRF Live or the podcast, however you're watching it. This is the field for the Arlington Classic. He just ran into a good field where you had Camelot Kitten, who has always been a highly touted horse for Chad Brown, no surprise. Beach Patrol, a very good one for Phil D'Amato down in Southern California. He shipped east. This horse, Surgical Strike, ran on very gamely, and this is 3 times in a row he's run on very well. The 2 times prior to the turf effort, he did so on the poly track down at Turfway Park. He doesn't change leads, and that's a bit of a concern for me, and they're also putting blinkers on him for the first time. And I think that that's twofold. That's to try to get him into the running a little bit more. Maybe that sharpens him up and kind of keeps him going and says, all right, change leads, do what you're supposed to do. I think he's the most likely winner. I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole in a race like this simply because I don't really trust any of them as far as I can throw them. And that's why I'm going with a live long shot. And the number 2, It's Not Easy Being Breezy, 30-1 in the morning line. And the most interesting thing about this horse, and I think people will look at it and say I'm crazy, he's a maiden. He's raced one time. He ran very greenly, but I thought he ran very gamely. It seems like he has a little bit of potential for upside, and his conditioner, his trainer, Gerald Ashender, is a very sharp guy. I think this is a scenario where this horse, maybe he can't win, but at 30 to 1 on the morning line, he could offer some value underneath because I think you're going to get a decent effort out of the two. It's not easy being breezy. The Miller Stakes, part of the Cal Gold Rush card out at Santa Anita tomorrow afternoon. The most likely winner, this is almost insulting that I'm even saying this, but this may be the most fascinating horse that's going to run all day tomorrow, East Coast, West Coast, no matter where. The number 1, Enola Gray, goes out for Phil D'Amato. Enola Gray was the flashiest of debut winners against Calbred Company in a maiden special weight race at 4 to 1. Whoever had her that day, good on you, because that may be the only time you're going to get that kind of number on her. She's 2 to 5 in the morning line. She's probably going to go off at 1 to 9. She's going to try 2 turns for the first time. Maybe she can do it, maybe she can't. If she can, she is way the horse to beat. She earned a 99 in her career debut. And we're not comparing her to Songbird. Talked to Brad Free in the Southern California report yesterday. She's run as fast as Songbird has in any of her races at this stage in her career. So it'll be interesting to see what we get out of Enola Gray. She is the most likely winner of the Miller Stakes. And then the Snow Chief. I think the most likely winner of the Snow Chief, it's a short field, only 6. I think the most likely winner is the 5, Tough It Out. I think he really wants the mile and an 1/8, and I think that's really going to be the difference maker between he and some of the other runners in this spot. I think he's going to appreciate the added distance where some of the other ones may not like it. I don't love him, but I think he's the most likely winner in a short field. I think a live long shot is the 3, Glory Bound. You've got 4 horses coming out of a race up at Northern California at Golden Gate Fields, the Silky Sullivan. This horse, Glory Bound, was in mid-pack and everything was working out just fine and dandy, and then as they turned for home, got shuffled, got jacked up a little bit, had to steady, never was able to commence any sort of run, was taken care of. I don't know that this horse wants a mile and an 1/8, but I think at the 10 to 1 morning line, anything close to that, I think the 3, Glory Bound, could be a bit of an interesting live long shot in a short field of 6 in the Snow Chief. So, a quick rundown of what we're looking at for handicapping this weekend. Arlington Classic, most likely winner, the 4, Surgical Strike, live long shot, the 2, It's Not Easy Being Breezy. The Miller, most likely winner, Captain Obvious, the number 1, Enola Gray. And the Snow Chief, most likely winner, the 5, Tough It Out, a live long shot, the 3, Glory Bound. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on the Matt Bernier Show presented by Monmouth Park. When we come back, we're turning for home. We'll give you an update and a sort of preview of what's to come here this weekend on DRF Live, as well as the video of the week. Stay with us.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
12:53 East Coast, 9:53 West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live, presented by our friends at Monmouth Park. We're turning for home, and, as we normally do, first things first, let's talk about tournaments a little bit, the DRF family of tournaments, because I know I may have jumped the gun a little bit a few weeks back when I teased the sort of intro, but guess what? We're here. Tournaments.drf.com, not only for your weekend play, during the week, we've got feeders that can get you into races, or contests, I should say, that'll be featured as far as DRF qualify, NHC qualify, BC qualify is concerned. They're all consolidated, one place, one-stop shopping now, tournaments.drf.com. You can get involved. And like I said, during the week, that's the best part about it now. You can get in with these feeders. You don't have to pay the entire entry fee to get in. You play in a little feeder, you get in for much cheaper, and then you play in the weekend, and you can hope to get one of the big sort of packages that we've got out there. So you're going to want to check it out. Tournaments.drf.com. It's live, it's up, it's good to go. Let's see, Mike Claudio, we've got a slate for what's coming up this weekend on DRF Live. Let's take a look. Here we are. This is starting. Now, again, any of you that have missed our recent coverage because of the summer and because of everyone bumping post times back, 4 o'clock Eastern, not 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock is when we start things off now here on DRF Live. Myself, Mike Beard, Dan Illman will bring you all these things going through. Our final live race we'll cover is at 7 o'clock East Coast time. That's the Snow Chief. But right after that, we'll end up throwing up not only our preview for the race of the day on Sunday, that's the Charlie Whittingham out at Santa Anita, but we'll also throw up the late pick 4 for Saturday. The timing is going to be perfect. Right after the Snow Chief, you'll be able to see what our late pick 4 looks like. Myself and Dan Illman will have that filmed here coming up shortly this afternoon. So we've got that coming for you. Any of you that have watched the show in the past, you know how things go at the end of the show. We throw up a little bit of a video. We're going to call it the video of the week. It's not very original, but at the end of the day, here it is. And it's a situation where, for me, I didn't realize, first things first, the National Spelling Bee, the Scripps National Spelling Bee, it's a big deal. ESPN covers it more often than not. And people love to watch these kids. They're, I don't know, they range from 10 to 14 years old or whatever. I don't know how old they are. But they go out there, they spell the words, and sometimes you see the elation of victory and the agony of defeat. Last night, you saw something. Now, we'll talk about the logistics of ending in a tie in a spelling bee, which is just asinine to me. But let's throw it to the video, and let's see. We didn't have the best sportsmanship of all time in spelling bee.
F.T. Gazelle.
That is correct.
You want to talk about leaving the kid high and dry. First things first, and we're gonna have to see it again. First thing, you're gonna have to notice the Des Bryant celebration coming up right now. Wait for it. The kid on the far right. Wait for it. Right there. Boom. X. Des. And then the other kid. I feel terrible. Talk about being left hanging. That's embarrassing. Let's go. And the other thing too, you can find some more videos on Twitter and on YouTube. There was another video of the kid clapping in his face when he got it wrong. Ruthless. Ruthless kids are. These are the kids that are ultimately going to run the country. It's terrible. It's terrible, terrible. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, look, congratulations to both of them. Logistically, how do you have a spelling bee end in a tie? And not just this year, last year, and the year before. This is 3 years in a row. I mean, as everyone, as the guys in the studio said, apparently they just have like a set number of words, and when they exhaust them, it's over. That's terrible. You can't end in a... At this point, everyone's ending in ties. Everybody gets a medal. I hate that. It's terrible. It doesn't matter. Anyway, that's our video of the week here on the Matt Bernier Show, here on DRF Live, 12:57. We're going to cut out of here. Claudio, do we have the formulated race of the day for today? We do. All right, we'll tee that up for you here momentarily. What race is it again? Belmont's 8th. We'll tee that up for you momentarily here on the show. Again, this show brought to you by our friends down at Monmouth Park on the Jersey Shore. They've got all sorts of good racing going on down there at Monmouth. Again, thanks for watching here on DRF Live. If you watch live on the simulcast, if you listen to the podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com. We're working on iTunes. I know I've had some people just absolutely chirping at me nonstop. The iTunes thing is very difficult. They make things more difficult than they need to be. So we're working on that. We'll see if we can get that done for you. But if you want to follow along on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. If you have questions, comments, complaints, whatever, suggestions, fire away at Bernier_Matt.